This is really before we actually get the main thing started, just like to thank the Student Wellness Center, especially a whole bunch of students, and of course the immense coordination done by Dr. Pratap Sharan and Dr. Aditi and several other, and Dr. Mohit Joshi and several other faculty members, including our classmate Dr. Sandeep Agarwal, who's also been the central part of this coordination, for having put together this morning's show. We are a little concerned about the bandwidth of internet available at my father's residence, so we opted for what we thought was a better option, is pre-recording the video, and it seemed to have worked till now. I'm sure we will get it to work once again, very, very briefly, but that's the explanation for this current hiatus before we kick off the main set of main program for the day. We'll wait till that happens.
So, Mukul, maybe you can, Amit, please start the video now.
Unmuted.
Right.
Hello everyone. Today I am with Dr. PN Tandon, one of the pioneers of the field of neurosurgery in India and who founded the Department of Neurosurgery in AIIMS. So it's a very great opportunity for all of us to hear his words, his views, and his wonderful stories that he has. So let's begin the interview. Sir, you started your medical school in a colonial India and finished it in a free India. So, like, according to me, it must have been very surreal to have felt the day of independence and heard Jawaharlal Nehru's speech, Twist of Destiny, on the radio. So, can you describe those days and the freedom struggle?
Well, let me say that day when Jawaharlal ji gave his tryst speech in the parliament was one of the greatest day in our life. I was a third year medical student. We were in the ward in the middle of the night to celebrate that moment. All each ward was having a great celebration. And then came this hour, midnight, and the radio was put on, and you could hear Jawaharlal Nehru give his speech. We were all primed to hear that, and yet it was one of the most emotional moment in our life that I can think of. One of the proudest moment in our life. It was a dream come true. So we were at the same time very proud.
Like, one more intriguing thing that I had to ask you is that the textbooks, the MBBS curriculum of that time and of that of today must have been surely very different because, like, when I like the in pathology we read Robbins, and Robbins was first published in 1950. So that's just around the time when you were doing MBBS. So how are the books and your curriculum different?
I don't know what Robbins is. I finished in 1950. I do not think the books changed very much for many years. And the fault was ours because we did not write books. We were proud of reading those books. And it made me think that one day I'll write a book which is Indian. And we did it. And you will be surprised that our book was quoted in a court of law in England.
So, like, when how did you decide like whether you had to do surgery or medicine?
Oh, that was very young. I was a young child when I did it. One of my uncles who was studying medicine in Lahore and he wanted to become a surgeon. Irvine Hospital was just opened. That's 1937 or something like that. And he was one of the first house surgeons. So when he came home, he will tell stories about the surgeries. And that's it. That's the time I decided that I'd like to do surgery because that was exciting. Later in life, when I was a medical student, I decided this thought became more, and for a very different reason. See, medicine those days was, if I may describe it in a few words, when two physicians met, they asked each other, what did you make of that case? When two surgeons met, they said, what did it turn out? So there was a certain degree of certainty about surgery, a certain degree of vagueness about medicine. And that is this, that is how that kept on in my mind.
So, like, then post completion of your PG, you moved to Oslo.
No, I didn't move to Oslo. No. I moved to Department of Anatomy. I was a senior demonstrator in anatomy. So, of course, because I didn't get any post for surgery. So I had no surgical job. I had no choice but to take anatomy. So I taught anatomy for 8 months. Then I came to Delhi to Irvine Hospital as a casualty medical officer. From there, I was virtually coaxed, cajoled, forced to join as a assistant surgeon in Silver Jubilee TB Hospital. I went to Silver Jubilee TB Hospital where a WHO team from Norway was coming to establish chest surgery to treat these patients of tuberculosis. So reluctantly, there's too much of a detail to go into, I joined there. And then that changed my life. I did chest surgery for 1 year. I operated thoracoplasty. I did even a pneumonectomy. I put my finger in the heart to dilate a mitral valve. But some of these operations I did independently, especially the thoracoplasty, because my chief was remarkably. And to cut the story short, he virtually adopted me. He was a bachelor, and so he said, you come to Norway, we'll train you. Anyway, in the meanwhile, I was selected as the chief medical officer in Madhya Bharat, which I didn't want to join. Chief medical officer means civil surgeon come district medical health officer at the age of 26 years. You know what it means? With a huge fat salary and a tremendous practice. But that was not my heart. So ultimately, anyway, once again, to cut the story, I just decided to pursue what I wanted to do in life. And my mentor, since it is recorded here, I can certainly repeat it. He asked me one day, what do you want to become? And I said, I want to become a surgeon in an academic institution. Why do you want to go to Madhya Bharat? I said, in 2 years' time, I will earn enough money to go to England and do FRCS. Without FRCS, you cannot become anything in this country at that time. So we had already become independent. But without FRCS degree, you couldn't get any job. MS didn't mean anything. I had already done my MS. So he said, so he took out his checkbook and said, write down what money you need. I was scared. I didn't know. I was dumbfounded. I said, sorry, I'll decide. So then he said, take a paper and write down on 2 sides. One side, if you go to Madhya Bharat, how will your dream come true? If you go to England now, how will it help? I wrote down that anyway. I went to show him that paper. He took me to the bank and I didn't know that. He just said, I want you to come with me to Connaught Place. We entered a bank. I said he probably wanted to draw us money. Then he told the manager, transfer $1,000 in his name and open an account. What do we do? I had $1,000. When he came out, I said, what did you do that? He said, I'm not giving you that money. I'll take every penny of it back. And now you know I have a lot of money. I have no use for it. I'm a bachelor. I have no family. So I want to see you achieve that goal. So I resigned from Silver Jubilee TB Hospital. I had already applied for admission to Royal College. I went to England and did my FRCS. And when I finished my FRCS, it is then I went to Oslo. And lo and behold, he wanted me to do neurosurgery. And not just surgery that he taught me that I wanted to do. And it's interesting the reason. Again, it's given in this book. He wrote to me, I was doing a house job in England at that time after my FRCS to get some money. And he wrote to me that, come join neurosurgery here. I said, but why neurosurgery? He said, there are only 3 neurosurgeons in India at the present moment. There are more than a dozen thoracic surgeons. And so that's an area you should work on. But more important, the neurosurgeon here is a person who is so, I like him so much because he's such a nice person. He and his wife, I want you to come and work with him. So I wrote to my chief and asked him, what do I do? He said, doesn't matter what you do, whether you do chest surgery or neurosurgery. It is how well you do that would matter. And how well you are trained, that matters. It doesn't make any difference. So I went to Norway, joined neurosurgery. I knew 5 Norwegian words when I joined as assistant. Not assistant, just I joined it. It's interesting. When I reached there, I was taken to my chief, who had invited my mentor, Dr. Wolodarski, who from now on I'll call Papa Volo, which I called him later. He took me to, we were invited to Dr. Krishan's house for supper. And at the end of the supper, when we came to sit in the drawing room, when usually people have drink there, he said, well, start tomorrow morning. I said, you don't know me. How do you know that I've never seen neurosurgery. I am told it requires a lot of patience and I'm an impatient person. So I'm not, So I said, look, I know your biodata, and that tells me that I can train you. Number two, Volo says that you have to be trained. Then you have to be trained because Volo says so. I can't say no to him. There was no question of salary, there was no question of appointment. Tomorrow morning, Volo will bring you to the department and you start. Soon after, I got the appointment and I got the money. The money was put in the bank. I had to give that money to him every day, every month, because I had told him in India we do that. When you get the first salary, you come home, you give it to the eldest member of the family. So he took that money and put it in the bank. Anyway, so my chief said, look, you work with me for, then next year you go to Montreal. So I said, who will take me there? He said, but that's my responsibility. I'll talk to Dr. Penfield. I don't know if you have heard his name. Dr. Penfield was at that time the Lord of neuroscience in the world as the chief of the Montreal Neurological Institute. I'll talk to him and get you there. And so 2 months later, he met Dr. Penfield in a conference and came back and said, it has been done. We are going to Montreal at the end of this. I said, well, why? I can spend another year with you and go back home. He said, no. You must be as well trained as anybody else in the country today. And all the three of the neurosurgeons, mostly known neurosurgeon in India, Dr. Chandy, Dr. Ramamurthy and Dr. Ginde have all been trained in Montreal, and you have to be trained there. And I spent 2 years in Montreal. In between, when I came, my chief in Lucknow said, are you silly? Join now, tomorrow as lecturer. Those days to become lecturer in KG Medical College was somebody giving you moon on your hand. He said, join tomorrow. I said, no, I'm going back because I have to go to Montreal. I said, what are you silly? Why are you wasting time? I said, because I'm not trained. So I went to Montreal.
So, sir, like the technology, the resources that you had in Montreal and in Oslo must have been quite different from what you got back when you came here in India.
You see, we had nothing. My chief, Dr. Christiansen, came to Lucknow and he saw my facilities. He knew I won't have enough instruments, so he brought some instruments with him. I'd called him to operate on a patient. So he brought some instruments from a instrument company. Okay, and he could not operate unless he had those instruments. He was invited in Montreal as a guest of honor for the annual function to give a lecture. And there, in his introduction, he said, I bring you greetings from another alumnus, Prakash Tandon, whom I visited recently at Lucknow. And then went on to say, this is from his letter which I have with me even today. If I had not seen his patients alive with my own eyes, I would not have believed that surgery was possible with such limited facilities. At least in Lucknow, we had the basic minimum set of Down Brothers neurosurgical instruments. When I come to Delhi, or the great All India Institute of Medical Sciences, where I was told that funds from Rockefeller Foundation are available, will get you all the instruments that you want, flown over within a few weeks. The only instrument I had, which was purchased as a disposal of the American Army station in India when they sold their equipment, which are crude, rude, and useless. My drill was in 3 pieces, all the screws were missing, I couldn't make a hole. And yet the patients were crowding up. And we had to operate. And again, those are interesting stories, these are sad stories, they are encouraging stories. Ultimately, I was told if you don't start operating, people will say you don't know how to operate. So don't get that reputation. Once that reputation comes, that's finished. I had no assistant. I had no equipment. I had no nurse trained. And yet here, these details are here. Read it sometime. Anyway, I did the first operation. That was a spinal tumor. The investigation was so poor that I did not know how big it is. I thought it was a small job. I will do it quickly with the few instruments that Dr. Christiansen had left me. It turned out to be a huge big tumor, very bloody. It took me 5 hours to just remove that spinal tumor. But luckily, the very next day, his paresis started to improve. So I did a couple more with those instruments. Then we had a couple of tumors, brain tumors, which turned out to be inoperable. And when I said they're inoperable, my colleagues in neurology department said I am just trying to hedge, not operate. Shall we send them to Vellore? Shall we send them to Bombay? I said, but luckily, one of them died, and I managed to get an autopsy and proved that the patient was inoperable. And the second one, I did a blind biopsy and proved that this was a tumor in the thalamus, cannot be operated. So I had to prove that I can operate a brain tumor, and ultimately I did. The patient was unconscious, and anyway, it's a long story. Again, I operated on virtually semi-conscious patient, half paralyzed on one side. And we started, I couldn't do an angiogram because we didn't have the facility. A third rate angiogram somehow, which could vaguely see, suspect ventriculogram. And I said, yes, there is a tumor. And the radiologist was, we don't know, maybe, yes, you are right. Anyway, I decided I'll operate. And I went ahead, operated, and it turned out to be a very bloody meningioma. Big. And so I started to operate, remove slowly, slowly. Dr. Baldev Singh, who was the professor of neurology, the doyen of neuroscience in this country, he stood behind me watching me to see how I'm doing it. And about 6 p.m. he said, he had started to call me Bhaiya. Within the few months that we both joined the same day. He as professor of neurology and I. And he said, Bhaiya, बहुत कर दिया, अब बंद कर दे. I said, sir, I don't know. If I close now, well, and if he dies, I will think I didn't do well. And if I don't go close and I continue, and he dies on the table because I'm getting deeper and deeper, then I'll curse myself. Both ways it is. But let me try a little more. So I tried some more. Ultimately, it came to a stage when I thought we could close. We closed the patient. He woke up. Whole night, I stayed with the patient. Next morning, he was awake. He talked to Dr. Baldev Singh and on the round and all the postgraduate students. By 1 p.m., I was told that he's unconscious. I could die. I was scared. I came and saw, yes, he was in a stupor. He could be aroused with difficulty. So the question is, shall I reopen him? He might either the brain has swollen, or the tumor has swollen, or there is blood clot. And I haven't got the equipment to diagnose it. I touched him and I found he had a high temperature, 104. I sat down and sponged him myself. And as the temperature came down, he opened his eyes. For the next 2 days, most of the time, we kept on doing that. He survived, he lived several years, ultimately died of a coronary heart disease. Then I luckily did a series of brain tumors, which went off very well, so that my colleague who's in neurology who suspected that I was not capable, not Dr. Baldev, the assistant professor, said, आपके तो सब मरीज ठीक हो जाते हैं. I don't know whether it was a compliment or
Like you also must have had a choice between public working in a public sector in AIIMS, and sometimes you might have got offers from the private sector.
many.
So like, why didn't you?
I decided that one of the reason why we have not done well in this country to become something good is because of the private practice. So even in Lucknow, when I was allowed practice, I didn't. And my wife was allowed practice before we were married. She never practiced. Okay. Now, a young man, very bright young man, trained in neurology in NIMHANS, once asked me this question. He said, sir, he had come in practice in Delhi, earning a lot of money. And I said, sir, don't you feel I've been here on only 2-3 years, I earned so much money. Don't you ever feel that you? I said, no. Then I told him, you know, the difference between you and me is only one. You gather wealth for yourself. I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe that I'm gathering wealth for the country. Right. Now, we didn't have, my wife, she had gave up her job in Lucknow, a brilliant career, came to Delhi, one salary. She never minded. That was never her concern. It was, she was upset that she lost her. She was the first postgraduate in gynecology in UP. Okay. So anyway, but when we came to Delhi, Nikhil was 1.5 years old. And she said that if I have brought him in this world, I have the responsibility to bring him up in this world. So it was not a concern. Our needs were not great. We had no needs. We will now live a simple life. But I always believe that we are third rate in the world because we don't devote time to produce knowledge. We are only following knowledge. We are reading other people's books. We follow what they tell us. Why? Why we are slaves? We are not political slaves, we are mental slaves. And I don't want to be a mental slave.
So like in front of you, a lot of infrastructure of AIIMS, including the CN Center and those things came up in front of you. So like over the years, what things have changed in AIIMS and what things have like remained static and the same?
A surgeon came from America, sent by one of our students. He wrote to me that he is coming to India, he will be in Delhi, he would like to visit your department and show him around. So he rang up one afternoon. I was in the office. So I'm such and such, I have come from all. So I asked him, come over. He came to the office. In my office, behind my chair, were the 4 photographs of my mentors in Norway and Montreal. So he asked me who they are. I told them. Then he said, so you work there? Yes. So then he said, you must be very frustrated after having worked in those places with such facilities, and now you have to work here. I said, look, I am not frustrated because I got training to be able to do work in my country. And I have to do with whatever facilities I have. And those who started neurosurgery, Harvey, Cushing, and Horsley, Victor Horsley, or even Penfield, they didn't have these facilities what they have today when they started. So if they could do neurosurgery with nothing, at least whatever little is better than nothing at all. Then we went to the ward. And he saw all the patients who had been operated during that week. So I walked him, at the end of this, I walked him to take a taxi. So when we were walking from our ward, he stopped on the way. And he said, I apologize. I said, for what? He said, you must be thinking, I'm so stupid. How could I make such a statement which I made in your office? What I have seen today, the operations that have been done in 1 week, no hospital in United States could claim that. We are not inferior to anybody. It is only give us the facilities, see us whether we can deliver or not. And we begged and borrowed, got what we wanted.
Lastly, what message would you like to share with the MBBS students who would be the main viewers of this video?
I will say, believe in yourself. Know what you want to achieve. Be willing to sacrifice for it. The joy will be when you get it. And you will get it. There is no question that you will not get it.
Right. So that was a wonderful video and the message from PN Tandon sir. Now we'll go over to Dr. Nikhil and Dr. Radhika, and they'll be showing a compilation of photographs, which is a snapshot of the journey of 6 decades. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Hardik. While we tackle technology and
No, I have to just a moment.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to be made hosts, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Share करो.
Yep.
We can see it.
Display करो. Full screen mode. Advancing from here. Thank you so much. This was, I've heard these stories before, as you can imagine, but they're always wonderful to hear every time. What we thought we'll do is very briefly, you heard a narrative, but we'll take you through a sort of a very, very brief visual journey of some of the highlights of my father and over the last 6 decades. Maybe if I speak a little less loudly, we might be able to get it without an echo. So let's take you through this journey. Now, the first set of slides will be from the time of my father, and this is a photograph. Many of you will recognize the place. This is actually the area adjacent to the AIIMSONIANs room where the NMGI office is, and just outside where the computer facility is today housed, and the PMR department on the other side. And the occasion was actually the transitioning from Professor Cale Wigg's tenure as director. And Dr. Wigg is here. I'm not sure if you can see, but the gentleman right in the middle in the dark suit with a tie. And on his left is Professor Ramalinga Swamy as the first of the two gentlemen in bow ties who was taking over as director. And these are names familiar to everybody because they have names on that. There's a whole bunch of other professors in the queue. Adjacent to Professor Ramalinga Swamy was Professor Keswani, who also went on to become dean. I will not take you through all the names. This is a bit of a close-up just to show. So this is Professor PN Tandon, actually flanked by two other Professor Tandons. Here on his right is Dr. H.D. Tandon, who also became director, and his left is Dr. G.C. Tandon, who was actually the first chief of anesthesia. And right behind them is Dr. Sneha Bhargav, who was also a director at some point. And right on top is Dr. Kakkar, who also subsequently went on to become a director. This is a snapshot from within the auditorium, very somber looking, fairly attentive crowd, I must say. And many years ago in a function, I think, organized by the Department of Neurosurgery. So this is a photograph of two people with whom my father interacted a fair deal. Professor Bhargav, who I said became till now the only lady director of this institution, and Dr. Gopinath. As it happened in those days, I think neurosurgery and CTVS OTs were adjacent to each other. They shared a common scrubbing area, and possibly washing the hands, they developed a relationship, which then eventually led on to the creation of the CN Center. So it's again, relationships became a very important part of life out there. Again, the same thing of life on campus with Professor H.D. Tandon and his wife. And I think this is a Holi was an important part of the AIIMS culture in those days. And this is a snapshot from the lawn of our house when I was growing up. But as you can see, so it's a Holi used to start in different points. The first position where it started was the boys' hostel. Slowly used to come out, eventually gathering faculty from their houses. It would actually culminate in the director's bungalow in those times. I'm not sure if that pond is still active. There used to be a pond in the director's bungalow, and there was a serial dunking of faculty inside that pond. So it was a fairly community-based event, and you will see a couple of more photographs of Holi in them. I was talking of relationships, and I thought it would be inappropriate not to mention this relationship. This is Professor Banerjee, who joined soon after my father as the department of faculty in the Department of Neurosurgery. This is an amazing relationship, and a relationship which possibly started all the way not strongly when they were both students at KGMC, but they were many years apart in their batches. But a relationship which evolved to an extent that, and I don't think many of you will believe what I'm going to tell you, that even today, till COVID, of course, struck, Dr. Banerjee visits our house every Sunday, if he is in town. That is the depth of that relationship. And you can again understand that enduring relationships have had an amazing role in a lot of things which have happened in the institute. And I think nurturing those relationships is very, very important. From a post-transit, I don't think we mentioned much about the National Brain Research Center, which was, I think, my father's post-retirement baby, so to say. Everybody loves the mission, and I think this was an important thing. This was conceived, implemented, and then nurtured, and it's now a lively institution in its own right. And it's been an important part of his post-retirement experience. And the other area which I think he contributed significantly was the whole area of science in India. And this photograph of Professor M.G.K. Menon, and then this photograph which has the 5 presidents of INSA over a period of time on the occasion of the Diamond Jubilee celebration of the Indian National Science Academy. Again, it shows an important part of what he has done, especially in the last 30 years. And this is, of course, the institutional representation of their gratitude. When Professor M.C. Mishra was the director, he started this Lifetime Achievement Award. And the inaugural year, amongst other colleagues, my father was one of those who was honored with this award to recognize, I think, his contributions to the institution over a period of time. I'm going to stop this segment of presentation before Radhika takes over with a slide in a very light way. And just, we've talked about work, and what was done in the theater and what was done out of the theater. But this is a slide which is an exception to the rule. It is an exception because my father is perhaps the most non-sporty individual who ever walked the earth. In his own words, the rare occasion he stepped onto the football field, the odds of him kicking the football were hugely outnumbered by the chances of the football hitting him inadvertently. I think this is his sole contribution to the world of sports, and which is bizarre. Though, of course, I don't think many people in this country did it. This was part of his, I suppose, part of extended extracurricular training in Norway, learning how to ski. I'm not very sure whether how good he became at it, but this is a photograph we treasure because it shows that sports bhi karte the kuch na kuch. Let me hand this over to Radhika to take on the presentation on our badge.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So, 40 years ago, a bunch of very bright and enthusiastic teenagers came together on the 1st of August at this very special institution, AIIMS Delhi, to form the batch of 1981. My father has a scrapbook where he collects snippets of information about the family, which have come in various, magazines or newspapers and so on. And he shared this with us. It's an interesting thing that there was a result of the AIIMS entrance test, and it came in the newspaper. I just recently noticed that there are 41 names on this, and 5 people actually didn't join. But everybody else have been very, very special to us because it was a very unique combination of people. And I must say, I cherish each one of my classmates. So we all started together. We were in this institute and we had lots of fun. This is a snapshot of one of the class parties. We did have some very nice parties. We had them in the second sem, which was in, the first party actually was in my house. My parents had a house in Lodi Estate at that time, and so we had a party there. Then we had another one in Bhargi's house. It was in Subroto Park. His parents were away and the flat was available alone to Bhargi. So this picture is from the party that he hosted. And then we had one party, I think after the second prof in the 5th semester, we had it. And the place we wanted was not available, and the swimming pool we just asked, and it was actually not filled up yet. It was still end of winter, so we had the party inside the swimming pool. It was really surreal. It was wonderful. And we had one party on the auditorium. When you enter the auditorium from the left entrance, there is a telephone exchange. So that time that was an open hall, and luckily we got permission and we had a wonderful New Year's Eve party, I think, over there. So we had a good fun. We also were good friends with some of the people in the batch immediately above and below us. So there were good times. Talking about Holi, this picture, I don't remember from exactly which Holi celebration it was, but this is from the lawns of Nikhil's house, C11. But I will never forget our first Holi. And as Nikhil said, the tradition was that the Toli would start from the boys' hostel. And we were a batch of about 10 girls, and we came to know that the girls never used to go. So we sort of picked up our bucket and filled it up with gubaras, and we dragged it all the way to the boys' hostel quadrangle. And I remember we were shouting, "Second sem, come down." Nobody was coming. And then, literally that after some, there were 3 or 4 of us, and we were just feeling too embarrassed. And then luckily some of the boys came, and then gradually more of the seniors came. And one of the seniors, in fact, was telling Malini that, Malini, ye kya subah subah aapne utha ke mera joint kharab kar diya. And Malini was saying later, oh my God, but so it was very, very funny. So we then moved on from there and then went to all the faculty houses. So Holi was definitely a very nice time to share. And then we used to come back to the hostel. This is again chilling out on Holi. The mess used to be closed, so we used to tell the mess wala to make us pack lunch, or we would cook Maggi noodles on whatever little stove we had. And then evening again, there was to be no food on Holi, so we would either go to eat at the food carts in South Extension, and then later sometimes the cafeteria would be open. So those days there was no concept of going out to eat in restaurants, and there wasn't any concept of ordering home and home delivery and things. So it used to sometimes be a challenge as to what to eat for the rest of the day. The other point is class parties. We did have some very nice class trips, sorry. We had 3 class trips. There was one, the first one, of course, was to Shimla, Summer Hill, which was a wonderful experience. Then this is a picture from the trip to Nainital, which was a spur of the moment, sudden decision. It was in winter, so not everybody went, but it was good fun. And you can see here is Sandeep Agarwal, this is Anita Deswal, this is me, this is on one of those pedal boats. And here again, this is from the Nainital trip, and Shubhashish and other people. So then another snapshot of this was actually our Baldabgarh posting, where we were taken to a factory to learn about occupational health. And you can see we were quite enjoying the class. And Nikhil, as usual, was cracking jokes. So he would be cracking jokes, everybody would be laughing at his jokes, and he would be writing the notes simultaneously somehow and get very good marks. So here we have, I'll hand over to Nikhil to tell you about this picture.
So there was a question which the students wanted to ask, and we just put this one photograph. This has very little topical relevance in terms of people on the screen, but the USMLE or its equivalent was always a standard part of our existence. It used to be ECFMG followed by what was called the visa qualifying exam. For a very short period, something called the FMGEMS. So we were a batch, few batches around us which went for FMGEMS. Exam was not possible in India. Initial days, ECFMG, people used to go to Manila, and around our time, people used to go to Lahore. So the Lahore expedition used to be, an annual expedition. This is just a trip to Lahore. Again, as it happened, relationships have always been complicated between countries, but relationships between human beings have always been quite strong. So the gentleman sitting in the middle of the picture was the chief of neurosurgery at Lahore Medical College, who my father had possibly met once in a meeting, and he wrote to him in a letter. The only way you could communicate in 1987 was a formal handwritten letter. And I must say, the gentleman looked after us tremendously. We stayed in a standard place, whatever it was, but I think one of the reasons I didn't do too well in the MLE also was because we were looked after so well. We were feted, wined, and dined for all the 3 days that we were there. But yeah, it was a tradition. Virtually everybody who could did try and take the MLE because that was one potential port of call. A large number of people went. An increasing number of people have returned, and that is the good part of this whole story.
So coming back to the hostel, we used to have this tradition for celebrating birthday parties. We would wake up at midnight and greet the particular person, and we had spent a lot of fun times doing that. This is a picture from the AIIMS cafeteria. So after studying in the library, I must say it was, the library was a very, very useful place. It was open very late. I think it was initially open till midnight, and then it started. We usually didn't stay much beyond midnight, and then after studying, we would go to the cafeteria and have something. And we were a very happy lot. We enjoyed our company, and this is a picture from the hostel mess. This was girls' hostel number 10. The mess was on the first floor, just above the common room. And it was a simple life, but we really enjoyed ourselves and spent a lot of time together. Nikhil, you talk about this one?
Yeah, so this is the auditorium on the occasion of the convocation of our batch, and you can see all decked up, suited, booted, tie, coat, looking all prim and proper, very different from what we would in normal daily life. But this was a very, very important occasion. It's, given what's happened in COVID and things turning virtual, this was really, no other degree received was such an important part of life. I think this was a great occasion, and this is one of the few photographs we've sort of retained and cherished. This is actually a nice photograph, just more so to remind you that the floral rangoli, which you see even today, happened even then. This is one of those enduring traditions of AIIMS, and I think it's great to continue seeing it. The Phoolon ki ladi at the back, and this rangoli, and some helpful sort had taken a photograph from the balcony of this, and as you can see, a lot of we were a tall batch, and that was, I think, a source of some discomfort to our seniors during ragging, because we had lots of people at 6 feet plus or minus 1 inch. And I think we gave a little bit of grief to our seniors because they had to really look up at us before they ragged us. So that was another thing. This is, of course, a batch. You can, several people recognize who Dr. Sandeep Agarwal is here, Jason to Radhika. And again, but I think the best photograph from that convocation was this. When all the real important people had left, we decided that we should behave as if we are also important. So we commandeered the stage, took over the big high back chairs, and looked very, very sort of important and doing things as if we were contributing significantly to the occasion. But again, we were happy with small things. I think we didn't have much of an opportunity for high-tech pleasure. So this was a low-tech pleasure that we gave ourselves.
This is just an image from my time in ophthalmology. I was a junior resident. We used to do these eye camps. And again, eye camps gave us an opportunity to really see how much work needs to be done, how there are people far away who don't have access to care. And it was an opportunity to take the healthcare delivery system to their doorstep. And there were, again, wonderful times we spent, because it was a team of a faculty, senior resident, junior residents, and everybody used to chip in. The driver, then the cook, and the nursing orderly, the nurse. So it was a teamwork, and there was a lot of sharing of work. In fact, I remember it was the driver who taught me so well how to do an eye bandage, which is actually not that easy to bandage an eye, and it was the driver who taught me, and I'll never forget that. Then this picture was when Nikhil was going to leave for England. It was very nice that his family accepted me, and it was relationships go through different stages. And this picture somebody took for us just before he was leaving. And then, luckily, we were all able to get back together for our 25th year. We had tried our best to get as many people who could come. Everybody had children, different schedules, busy times. So it was difficult for everybody, though everybody would have loved to come, but it was not possible. But whoever were there, it was nice getting back together, sharing stories, and knowing that we would share this bond forever. And then during COVID, we were having so many Zoom calls and all. And then towards the end, we decided that let's have a Zoom call of our own and catch up. So here you can see Anita, Ragini, Gauri, Dipali, Vidya, Malini, and myself. And this is the same bunch. So this is probably one of the birthday parties we were going for. I just wanted to show you that the images, how we were young, and now we've grown that much older. But the bonds will remain forever. Yeah.
So we're just going to wind up, but just to say this is a special moment for me. This happened a few years ago, I think, when Professor Buleria's perhaps his first year as director, and I was fortuitously being given one of those AIIMS Research Excellence Awards. And as it happened, my father was the chief guest for that particular occasion. So it's an interesting thing, receiving an award from one's father in the presence of another, if I can use that term. We used to call ourselves fat kids in those days, because offspring of the faculty. So one fat kid giving a prize to another fat kid in the presence of one of the fat kid's fathers. So and this is just to show, and this, so Mukul, who helped put up a lot of these things, came to my office the other day, and after he left, I suddenly realized that actually as it happens, and this is per chance, this is not by design, that I'm currently sitting on the 7th floor of the convergence block inside the endocrine lab. The adjacent room is actually an epilepsy neurobiology lab, which has been eponymously named after Dr. PN Tandon. So it's interesting that we occupy adjacent rooms on the same floor, even if we're not, even if he doesn't come there. And this is a photograph from the balcony of the convergence block on the 7th floor. And you can see the quadrangle in all its glory, as always, perhaps the most recognizable part of AIIMS. Most beautiful area, and in the distance you can see the new buildings coming up. I think that's all that we have in terms of the slides, and we're going to maybe stop sharing the slides now.
Right. So this was quite wonderful, going through all the pictures of all the times. So I think we can start with some questions that I have thought of, and the first question is for Nikhil sir. And Nikhil sir, how was your life at the campus, being a faculty's child, or as you call it, being a fac kid? So how was your life at that time?
So life, I was great fun. It was absolutely great fun. Remember, you now think of it differently, but we thought this is something which is normal, but really that microcosm in which we live was not part of any other residential area in New Delhi at that point in time. It was a residential colony. All the people with whom your parents or father or mothers or parents worked with were all around. So very, very close-knit. It was a small faculty time. We had children of our age. I mean, we were maybe 20, 30 people of the same age group. It was mandatory coming out in the evenings, mandatory games. The faculty club in our time used to be very active on the sports. The children could play badminton till I think it was 6:30 or 7, and the older generation were allowed on the same courts later. There was table tennis. There was swimming in summer, and then of course there were multiple fields. Unfortunately, none of those fields exist today. The big field, which is now currently totally taken over by IRCHCN Center and CN Tower, was a massive. Can you imagine a field of that size? So it was cricket, football, hockey, everything there. We also would to encroach onto the boys' hostel quadrangle for the same reason. So it was a huge bunch, and therefore several of my contemporaries from who grew up with me on the campus are actually on this call at this point in time. So we really stayed in touch, and it was great fun. A huge amount of bonding, and that's persisted even now.
So the decision to join AIIMS as an undergraduate, so this must have also added to that decision. And so why did you choose to join AIIMS in the beginning as an MBBS student?
Two parts. One is, why medicine? And I think there was an element of inevitability in medicine. When everybody around you is a doctor and everybody above you and below you wants to become a doctor, you actually think that that's the only profession. But also remember, unlike today, the number of opportunities, the number of professions available to us was few, right? So there was medicine and engineering, and then some colleagues did BCom and became chartered accountants. Some did eco, and went down the MBA route. I mean, those were the 3 or 4 big ones. So doing medicine there was no pressure. There was no recommendation. It was, I can use the word, taken for granted. And once you decide to do medicine, then obviously you want to go to the best place, right? I mean, that you need to have that aspiration and that ambition. So again, once it was decided that medicine was going to be a target, then you really need to go to what was then and is today still considered to be the best place to go for it. So I think that was a no-brainer in today's time.
Mm-hmm. And the same question for Radhika ma'am. What about your decision to join AIIMS?
Yeah, so with me it was a little different. My father was a naval officer, and I had lived in different cities in India, different parts. Usually it was at coastal areas. And my mother was a professor of French at JNU. Of course, I could have joined the services, but I was not that inclined, and somehow it seems to be an anti-incumbency kind of a thing children follow, because I was not again motivated to do French and languages. The other thing is I was more a science person. So as Nikhil said, these decisions evolve over time, and I certainly knew I wanted to do something related to science. And I did have a passion for medicine because I did have some doctors in the family. But school makes a lot of difference, and we used to have. I really cherish the time I spent with my schoolmates, and my decision kept changing. So I did consider doing engineering. That time, you could appear for the IIT exam after class 11. So I studied for IIT. I took the entrance exam, and but over the course of that time, I decided that it was too difficult doing physics and all those numericals. It was going to be so. I did have the opportunity to join, but I decided not to. And then I started studying for medicine. The other thing is, one thing more talking about school is we used to discuss with our school teachers. We had amazing teachers, and we used to discuss with them. And I also had given the idea, the concept of joining the civil services. And one of my teachers said, "See, look, if you don't get in, if you get in, yes, you'll be very powerful. But if you don't get in, you won't get a 1,000 rupee job as a clerk anywhere." So that was, as Nikhil said, that is the perception at that time, that it had to be engineering, it had to be medicine if you really wanted to do something. Then I focused. I decided I wanted to do medicine, and fortunately, I was successful in getting admission. And when it was AIIMS, I again selected AIIMS over the other medical colleges.
Right. And as we dwell over the UG life, I'll also ask about your experiences in Pulse and the development of Pulse at that time.
Yes, so definitely AIIMS is a unique place. There is a sort of a freedom, so much of empowerment given to students, which makes a lot of difference. It encourages students to develop leadership qualities. And Pulse is one such opportunity where it's responsible leadership and responsible fun. So, as you all know better than us now, that the main bulk of Pulse organization is done by the 7th semester. So, when we joined, I remember I participated in the play. So I was always engaged culturally, and in fact, they just joined as freshers, and Nikhil and I participated in a jam, just a minute, and quizzes as well. So it was good fun. But when it was our responsibility, then you go through the various stages, and then it was the 7th sem when it was our batch's responsibility. And a bunch of us were sitting in the boys' hostel quadrangle. I remember Mukesh was there, Lalit was there, and perhaps Sandeep Agarwal was there as well. And we were discussing that what can we do a little different. And we thought that we can have a theme. So there were 2-3 things we introduced. One is we thought that we would have a PQRST kind of a concept, that P wave will be the inaugural, and we'd give a sneak preview of what is to come. And then the T wave was supposed to be the final grand finale with the best of show, and all the winners were supposed to present. And in the P wave, then a bunch of us had got together, and we had very little talent, but somehow we put together a good show. It was good fun. There are a lot of stories related to that, but I don't think we'll be able to cover everything. And we also had a mascot that year. So we had Balu the bear as a mascot, and we had, made posters and things. So I would say that the P wave, I'm so happy that the tradition of the P wave has grown so wonderful, and it's such a lovely presentation. And each time one is really blown away by the talent and the capacity that medical students have, that they come up with such a wonderful show.
Right. Right. And yeah. And I have a question for both of you. Like, how did your relationship develop over the UG years? And like, what was the whole journey, and what were the major milestones? To put it correctly. Yeah.
So, short answer is obviously developed well, right? It sort of reached and it evolved into a sort of natural point of us getting married to each other. So we must have evolved appropriately. So that's a short answer. I think what really happened was we were thrown in together for a range of things. I think the first occasion was, as was being discussed, was also the first semester, right? Because we were both commandeered into, I think it was a literary committee, so we had to go here and there, get hold of judges for debates. So that was really the starting point, basically. It wasn't sort of, it didn't happen because of any specific machinations on anybody's part. It happened because of the responsibilities we had to deliver for Pulse. And then there was a natural comfort in sort of each other's company. I think also for people who know both of us, we're sort of reasonably different as human beings. So I think in terms of opposites attract also is important. Patience is Radhika's strong point. Impatience is mine. There are several such character traits which may not be, I'll be sort of doing some extent of self-incrimination if I go down that road, but essentially. So there was a business of opposites attracting, and I think it was a general comfort, and then it transitioned to a more exclusive relationship. I think by the time we were in the 6th semester or 7th semester, then actually Pulse did one more thing for that relationship, because the 7th semester, we were in different batches. You know, Radhika being 1307, 1327. So in normal circumstances, she would have gone for the 7th semester Ballabgarh posting at a different point. As it happened, her batch's Ballabgarh posting was going to be around Pulse. And given the fact that she was going to be doing P-Wave, it was not the right time for her to be out of campus. So then she exchanged her batch and ended up going with my batch to Ballabgarh. And that's why you see that photograph. And so again, I think that sort of consolidated the exclusivity. And then, of course, the internship batch, when we had the luxury of picking and choosing who would go, was again, and when we went there together. So, those are the intra-institutional milestones. And of course, as I said, things, then they went on the pilot after that. I know Radhika has a different version to this.
So, like, as you talk about the internship, how was life as an intern at that time?
Yeah, life as an intern, I must say, we really enjoyed our internship. Firstly, as Nikhil said, we went to Ballabgarh, our rural posting right in the beginning. So January, February, March. So that was incredible because we just become doctors and we were interns and we were sort of in fact, everybody becomes a Dr. Saab the moment you join AIIMS. So the first day you step into AIIMS, you become Dr. Saab. But definitely going in the rural area, you were very much hands-on and had a lot of responsibilities, and you were really treated with great respect. Plus, you did a lot of things which normally, if you were on the campus, people wouldn't even let you touch that situation. So that was an awesome experience. Plus, the facilities there were marvelous, and a whole bunch of wonderful senior residents, from different departments. You spend time, you learn so much by sharing meals and conversations with them. And then they had these wonderful cooks who would turn out the most fabulous dishes. So that was wonderful. Then, in fact, when you came back to AIIMS and you suddenly come back, join, and I think I had my casualty posting, and suddenly there, the most inconspicuous and most lowest down in the ladder. But there again, I must say, even in the casualty posting, I had, at least I recall, and Nikhil will also recall, there were some fabulous senior residents, surgical and medical, who really would give you things to do and, engage you. And you learned a lot about what medicine was like. And then it was always important to savor everything, to know what you actually wanted to do. So you had a broad idea that you wanted to do a post-graduation. But the internship was an opportunity to see that, is this something I really want to do? Because before that, you have some exposure and some theoretical knowledge. In fact, I did 2-3 electives intentionally again to see what PG to select. But I would really give great credit to the various senior residents and other PGs in the various departments who really made us feel who contributed a lot to our work during internship.
So was it in the internship that you decided that you will sort of join ophthalmology, or was it only earlier or maybe later?
It was consolidated during internship. So before that, obviously, we would have these discussions at home, and generally, my father was, they had some very close friends who were ophthalmologists, and my great grandfather had been an ophthalmologist. So definitely, it was one of the very important fields that I was considering. But I did want to make sure that it was right. And I must say, whatever decisions you make when you're in that exam, when you're in the PG entrance exam, right to that point, when you're actually ticking your choices, again, you have to think, because there's so many things which are which count on it. But yes, and I'm very glad I selected ophthalmology. I've never regretted it. I'm very, very happy I selected it.
Right. And what about you, Nikhil, sir? Endocrinology?
So it's an interesting choice, because it's like taking this discussion one level beyond, because it's not only what you're going to do in your first PG, but what you're going to do in your subspecialization. For me, the charm of endocrinology always was this great synergy between the lab and the clinic. That was the biggest charm. So if you felt you had some scientific pretensions, there was a lab to go to. And then that lab had a direct bearing on patient service. And also remember, in those days, we had Professor Emeritus Ahuja, who had carved out the Department of Endocrinology from medicine. Again, a major move. He was the chief of medicine. Traditionally, a lot of departments in the institute were created by people from a department who are not leading that department, but who are growing within that department, and then carved out a separate department to show leadership there. In case of Dr. Ahuja, it was the other way around. He was already the chief of medicine, but he went to create a separate department. Dr. Kochupille, who actually had a lot to do with my early training, again, he was incredible in terms of his juxtaposition of the lab on the one hand and community-based surveys on the other hand. It was actually a fascinating thing that the same human being established hormone assays and was very much part of going to Gonda, Basti, Bahraich, Gorakhpur to do goiter surveys. So I think that was really fascinating for me. It's been fortunately a decision which has been borne out.
Yep. And similarly, you also returned back to India and then joined AIIMS as a faculty member. So all of this combined, what was the whole thought process behind this?
I think the first thing is, when at the time you're going abroad, you need to have clarity as to why you're going abroad for. Obviously, things can evolve. You can change your mind. You may go with a certain intention. All of that happens. So when I was going, I'm going to sort of deviate slightly and tell you that little story in a moment. But when I was going, it was with the intention of doing a PhD. Full stop. There was no post-PhD plan of staying outside, right? And so I went, Radhika joined me there, but we always were clear that we were coming back. And, the moment I finished my PhD viva, within a month of that, we packed our bags and we had come back. So I think coming back was a given. And not that I had a great experience in the UK. It wasn't that, I felt unwanted and I felt that, yahan to ek minute bhi nahi ruk sakte, or it was a very enjoyable period. I learned a lot, but the plan was to come back. And then, of course, we were coming back with the whole effort had been to develop an academic career. Then again, as I said, if you want to do an academic career in medicine in the country, then you want to go back to what you think is the best place to be.
Right. And similarly for Radhika ma'am, like the same decisions. Yeah.
Very true. Yes, I also we're from India. I love the country, and I feel that it's nice to go abroad, because you it widens your horizons. You learn a lot of good things, and I must say I really appreciate all the things I learned from my experience of working in England. But then you always feel that we should improve, or we should contribute, try to do the best we can for our own institutions and our own country. And then I always enjoyed the fact that you can share your knowledge and teach and help your own people.
Right, right. That is true. Okay. And before I proceed with the next question, I'll ask the guests to maybe put some questions in the chat box that they'd like to ask Dr. Nikhil and Radhika, and also to Dr. PN Tandon, sir. The next question that I would like to ask is about your research interests. What were they then, and maybe what are you doing right now?
So actually, there's been a sort of an element of continuity from the time of my MD thesis. I was interested in thyroid disease at that point in time. MD thesis used to be with so Professor Malviya, because I was in the Department of Medicine, and I was interested in autoimmune thyroid disorders, and Dr. Malviya was an immunologist, a clinical immunologist. I went to him, and then with him came up with this thought as to what I should do for my MD thesis. Dr. Kochipille was the sort of nodal person in endocrinology, and I started therefore working there. Now, as it happens, for a lot of us, the MD thesis is just an exposure to research. But in my case, it sort of, again, I think a lot of things happen in my life which are more by chance than anything else. It then transitioned to a PhD, which was again in autoimmune thyroid disease, right? So it kept getting consolidated as I went along. Then joining the department, Dr. Kochipille had primarily an interest in thyroid disorders, and from a pure lab perspective, started doing epidemiology along with him. So school-age children level involvement of thyroid disorders. Then broadened it to other epidemiological conditions, other conditions or endocrine disorders in school-age children, and then went ahead to do more in terms of non-communicable disease epidemiology, and then picking from that intervention study. So I think it was each thing leading on to another, but the broad space has been NCD epidemiology, but with reference to potential interventions, especially strategies for health systems, strategies for clinical, for in-clinic improvement and quality improvement. So it's fortunately, again, one thing has segued to the other quite neatly, without planning too much. It's happened.
Yeah. And Radhika ma'am, your research interests?
Yes, so for me also, I would say that it was exposure to wonderful teachers. We have a wonderful institution like RP Center, wonderful faculty, and the learning that we do there, the gain is not only from the teachers but also from the peers and the senior junior residents and the senior residents and so on, and also from each other. Sometimes even from the ones younger than you. Certainly, one's exposure to research starts with the MD thesis, and I had Professor Sood as my chief guide, and he had asked me to do it was an animal model of to look at topical carbonic anhydrase inhibitors and if they could work. I must say it was very nice working with him, and later on I had gone to present my work at a meeting in Helsinki, and a lot of people had come to my poster, and and then later on some better module formulations of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors have actually become commercially available. So it was nice to see that whatever we did, as even my Professor PN Tandon had said, it was nice to see that work that was done with the facilities available in one part of the world was being revalidated in other parts of the world. And that is what I found was good about research, that you have to have a good research bent of mind. You do your experiments with what you have available, and if it is done well, it can really make a relevance. After that, I've had a range of research interests, I must admit. But largely, currently, I'm maximally interested in work on cornea and bioengineering, tried to get a good artificial corneal model so that we don't have to depend so much directly on donor tissues, and also epidemiology, because if one gets more information or knowledge about the prevention of disease or measures to understand what's happening in the community, I think that is something which one needs to keep encouraging. So I am very much interested in these areas at the moment.
Right. Dr. Sandeep Agarwala would also like to ask some questions. Dr. Sandeep.
Hi, Nikhil and Radhika. This is Sandeep here.
Hi,
So
Sandeep.
I would just like to kind of consolidate what you have said, and some things which the people, undergraduates who are now, realize that in our time there was no counseling for PG entrance, right? We used to pick choice 1 and choice 2 when we were taking the exam, and that's it. Either you get it or you don't get it, come back again the next time around. And that was very tough, I must say. And so you have spoken nearly everything about the batch. The three of us are left here in the batch. You, Nikhil, and myself, the three people from 1981 batch, are still in the institute. So how do you perceive the current situation of undergraduates from AIIMS joining back as faculty, which is now not so uncommon, but still we have some from every batch who are coming. How would you encourage them to think about academic career, especially a career at the institute?
So I would certainly tell the undergraduates that you are well equipped to work hard and to really contribute by considering a career in academics. And see, there is no, if one keeps comparing with others and one keeps thinking that this life is better, that life is better, then it can be often confusing. So you generally choose your comfort level, and then you always need to keep a kind of a plan B. So if you have decided you want to become a faculty in the institute, believe me, it's not going to definitely happen, because things are very complicated nowadays. So you think a general idea, but do keep this as an option. And you must have a plan B and plan C in your mind, so that you don't, feel very upset if you don't get what you plan. Because whatever happens, you are going to work out fine, and your life is going to be good. You just have to learn to remodel yourself, or sort of revise your strategy as the situation demands. Um, but certainly the kind of exposure you get, the variation in your work, it's so rewarding, and it's so you're busy all the time, and you get little things will make you happy. So often you have distressing situations as well, but then that's very much part of life. And the best part about AIIMS is the people. There is such a remarkable lot of very dedicated, wonderful people in so many ways at all levels. Even some of the office staff, when you interact with them, they're so dedicated, so wonderful. You've all interacted with them. Even when you have a convocation, you have these very hardworking people who are putting you in the line and getting you onto the stage and bringing your certificate in the right order. You won't know how complicated that is, and how till the last minute sometimes the person is not come, and not sure if this person is going to show up on stage. So the CAD section, the director's office, the entire bunch of people working in AIIMS is wonderful. So it's good to have good people on faculty, so that you can motivate more people to do well in the future.
I think
just wanted to say that.
Radhika,
Sorry, go ahead, Sandeep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So Radhika and Dr. Nirja from Gaini have been doing the backstage management of the convocation for years on end, and you don't know how much hard work goes into it, as Radhika was saying, right? Nikhil, over to you.
No, I was just I was saying, listen, to each his own, right? In some senses, some people are clear what they want to do. They want to go down a certain track. But I think what we really need is that if there need to be an opportunity for people to be able to discuss the pros and cons of what they think is appropriate for them. Some people may want to, whether it's, even a decision as to what post-graduation you want to take, or a decision as to whether you want to stay on as a faculty member, or try to stay on as a faculty member, or go into practice, go back to the city where you came from to establish a clinical hub there. I think they're all multiple choices. Each one of those choices has its own merit. So I don't think there's any sort of rank order that this is better than the other one. The only important thing is that once you are developing some thoughts on this, there should be an appropriate guidance so that you're not taking these decisions in a vacuum, right? You should be able to talk to other people formally, informally, and then arrive at a conclusion. Decisions can still be wrong, but not every decision in life is correct. But the process should be thought through so that at least you're reassured that you did the appropriate amount of thinking and consultation before you took that decision.
Yeah, right, Nikhil. And I think the same line as Dr. PN Tandon said, believe in yourself. That I think is the most important thing. That whatever you choose to do, I think you believe in yourself. I'm sure all the people graduating from AIIMS will excel at whatever they do. So Hardik, I think for the end comments from your side.
I think I like the answers. I like what you are saying, and I would just like to remind everyone that Dr. PN Tandon is also available for the questions. He's live on the meeting, so you can ask questions to him as well. Dr. Sandeep, more questions for Dr. Tandon?
I think we should let other people, if they want to ask something from Professor Tandon or Nikhil and Radhika. If there anybody, is there anything on the chat box which you want to highlight, Hardik? So look at the chat box and highlight some of the questions, queries put up.
Vashish Polisetti is saying that he thinks AIIMS alumni in different departments should be having meetings with confused interns so that they can discuss career decisions. Your thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I wouldn't even put the adjective of confused in terms. I think people are undecided, right? And I'm not at all surprised. People, as you heard, I mean, Radhika took till virtually the end of internship to reach that decision. It is absolutely appropriate to be open in your thinking and then gradually narrow down to where you want to go with due discussion. And I totally agree with that suggestion that as and when possible, if there's a mechanism which can be created for people to reach out and discuss the pros and cons. And a lot of discussions actually are really in the hostel. Remember, people who are a few batches above you will actually explain, what they're going through, whether this is the sort of life you want to lead. So I think that's very, very important. And then, of course, if you want to take that a notch higher in terms of age and experience, then the faculty should be available for that discussion. It's not confused, it's just uncertainty. And that uncertainty will get resolved over time.
Can I intervene?
Sir,
Can I intervene?
Yeah.
I want to tell what Nikhil hasn't told me. How he got into this. It is the director of the institute who contributed to this. There was a fellowship advertised called the Nehru Cambridge Fellowship, which was for, she was asked to nominate somebody. So she asked Nikhil, and Nikhil said, what have I got to do with this laboratory work that it involves to do PhD? That was for doing PhD. I'm interested in clinical work. So he talked to me. And I told him that if you want an academic career in life, unlike in my days, it will be important that you do MD PhD rather than do MD DM. He paid heavy price for it, for that silly advice, but also gained something which I won't go into detail as this. But this is the director who thought that this is the kind person who should be sent for this fellowship, and he was selected. Nikhil might like to comment.
Let me just add to it. So this was, and I think 3 of us were called by Dr. Bhargav and a suggestion made. 2 of the others did not apply. I did apply. I mean, it gelled in to a certain extent because endocrinology being endocrinology. Supposing I had an interest in cardiology, I may not have done it because the lab component was perhaps would not be that immediate, at least in those days. But I think being smaller institutions, your senior leadership being more familiar with students increases. The larger the institution, the degree of disconnect becomes more. So that was one point. The second thing was that it was left to us to take that decision, and I must say eventually it worked out well. I mean, it had its ups and downs. I was in the middle of my MD when I was told I needed to defer my admission. I think what it really gave me was an opportunity to go outside, which was fully funded. We didn't have money. We couldn't have gone and studied on our own. There was no way it could be done. But I'm whatever knowledge I gained is different, but I think what Radhika mentioned was critical. Your breadth of exposure increases. One danger, if I can use the word of all Indian Institute of Medical Sciences, is you're so convinced that what you are learning here is the only way of doing anything that you tend to become sort of over focused on that one approach, right? So the very fact that there was a possibility of another way of doing things itself is a good learning as far as I'm concerned. Once you're exposed to that, you may then come back and say, I decide that what I learned at AIIMS was perhaps the best suited, but it's not because it is something handed down to you by rote. You arrive at it independently after you have had suitable exposure. And the other thing about a PhD there was that you interact with multiple other sort of domains. So again, that gave you an insight to how other people thought. Not so. I think it was useful, very very useful in that sense.
Right. Any more questions from Dr. Sandeep?
No, thank you. I think you should go on with the concluding remarks.
Okay. If anybody would like to ask questions from the guests, they can put up in the chat box. Until then, I have one question. I actually like when I heard about your research work, I wanted to ask if there was any research that went on during the MBBS time, during the UG times. Like in right now, UGs are quite interested, but I don't know what was the scene 40 years ago.
So there was, I think, I didn't do any research during my UG time. Garmi ki chutti meant Garmi ki chutti, right? So we took our vacations very seriously in terms of, so I actually did nothing, honestly. But that's what there were opportunities. I know a couple of my classmates who actually did some research, but I think the opportunities are more now. I think the ICMR has some schemes which allow you to do it. There are people who, out of volition, have approached me and many colleagues to assist, to see whether they can assist us in some of the work that we're doing. But I don't think it was such a strong tradition. It was, I don't know if you had another.
Yeah, I think Hardik, I can talk. We all participated as guinea pigs. We didn't do research, but I think Dr. Ramesh Bijlani's work on kuttu and diabetes was very on, and we used to get funded. I mean, get your breakfast, lunch, and dinner of kuttu free of cost for some time. And then other experiments which are going on, we were very happy to get some money and donate our blood for those research purposes. So I think in our batch, that is all we did. We didn't do any research as you people are doing now. So as undergraduates, that was research for us.
Right. So we have some questions from the YouTube. There is a question from Anurag Chahal. Since both of you are excellent in your respective professional fields, how do you manage your personal duties, childcare, and family responsibilities? Is it equitably distributed among the both of you?
So let me give you my answer very quickly on this one. That I think it's a 95-5 divide in terms of what's being done, and I do 5%. So the 95% person will now answer the questions.
I must say that a huge contribution is to the grandparents because both the Nikhil's parents and my parents were in Delhi, and they really had key contributions for helping us rearing our children, because when they were very small, it was really very difficult because being busy at work. So I really I'm most grateful, and I'm so glad that they were both sets of parents were available to help with that. And then, of course, yes, somehow it just being close to the hospital also made a lot of difference. They don't have to spend time commuting, and also I do remember that when I was shifted to Konya, I was originally faculty in squint and neuro-ophthalmology, and then departmental rearrangement I had started in Konya. And then there was a requirement that you have to come back in the evening to do a corneal transplant. And then I'd be ringing up my parents that I have to do a PK today. Can you come? And my father said, you wanted to do ophthalmology because you wanted a free time. And what is this PK that you have to do? And, we have to come in the evening. And then later on, I used to arrange that I used to do the surgery after 8. I had to go back after 8:30 by the time the kids were asleep. And the other colleagues were also happy because they got to do the surgery at 6 o'clock. And I would be quite happy going back late. And I do remember during my PG days, when I was a postgraduate, I would sometimes be on duty and I'd see Dr. Anita Panda coming to the OT quite late through corneal transplants. And I think on my mind, oh, this poor lady, she has to come in the night even at this age. And then I realized that I was also having to do the same. But things have improved a lot now. We have better corneal transport medium, and we've organized ourselves better administratively. So I think it's somehow things figure out for themselves. You just need to say that these are the things which have to be done. You just share the work among yourselves, and it's not an issue really. It's part of life.
Right. There's a question for Dr. PN Tandon from Vaishali Une. Dr. PN Tandon, sir. Yeah. So, Dr. PN Tandon, what do you cherish most about your stellar career? The training, challenging cases, recovering patients, or the honors? What do you cherish the most?
Every bit of it. Looking after the patients, you will experience it. When you had a paralyzed patient that you operated upon, and some months later that person comes walking to you, the joy that you get is unbelievable. Similarly, when you have done some research and sent it to a good paper for publication, if it is accepted, you get the same joy. So it is, again, I may repeat, it's just not what you do, but how well it is accepted or how well it has resulted into something useful.
Right.
And that's the biggest joy of being a doctor, right? And the worst moment when you have operated on some simple thing and you end up with complications, one after another. That's the saddest day you can imagine. Your whole days and week is ruined by that one single experience. Paper rejection is very common anyway, so that
Right. There is another question from Sahil Gupta, who is AIIMSONIAN from 2007 batch. He wanted to ask you how to keep our spirits high when you have limited resources available, but there is a huge potential. To Dr. PN Tandon.
Okay.
Yeah, to answer.
There is a very interesting statement by Eisenhower, who said, "You must do what you can with what you have and where you are. And feel, as I told that American surgeon, all right, I don't have the best equipment, but with what I have, if I'm able to achieve something useful, help somebody, then that's all that matters. That gives you all the happiness.
Right. That is true. Yeah. So another question for Dr. Nikhil Tandon and Radhika Tandon. What is your advice in forming strong relationships as have been important for your career? It is a question from Snehanshu Sadangi.
Okay, so relationships are very important as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure you'll have the same. You'll carry forward relationships from your school days. What you actually established during MBBS perhaps will be your strongest relationships because you spend so much time together that if you can tolerate each other despite spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then clearly you get along with those people, and that's important. I'm just going to answer it from a slightly different, from a research perspective also. It's been, and I love doing collaborative research, and it's been very simple to get it going with people whom you bond with, right? To start off there. And then in certain other instances, you may have started with people whom you didn't know too well, but developed a relationship that's been very easy to sustain. And we've really, I think, had a lot of fun doing it, right? As opposed to doing it because this is opportunistic or because it's strategically useful. I think just the joy of that collaboration, because you look forward to meeting, speaking, interacting with people who become friends. And I think that for me is very, very important. So I believe strongly in that.
I would just like to add to that is, relationships are something which you just need to have a little mutual understanding, give and take. It should not be that I'm always right. And similarly for work and friends, and also engage in the people. You need to try to take time to have a little free time or leisure time, so that you get to know a different aspect of the person. So it's not possible to build a relationship intentionally. It should be something which comes natural. It should not be a motivated relationship. It should just be a natural course. And always remember that every person will have definitely some qualities which you will gel with, and something or the other you learn from each and every person you come across with. So always have that human engagement with people, and even with patients. Sometimes you'll find that they're such remarkable people. I'll often find mothers coming from far off places with little children, and they're handling the child, they're taking care of the treatment. Often they'll be coming alone. It's not easy. All the OPD cards and the medicines, and sometimes I really feel bad that we have so few minutes to spend with them. So I feel engaging with people, spending time talking to people, and feeling their feeling is very important.
Right. There is an open question from Vishal Serawat. Can you explain what a patient sees in a doctor? Is it his work or his focus or his lifestyle? So what does a patient see in a doctor when he comes to him?
So I think, let me just preface and answer something else. Unfortunately, very often there is a educational gap between the average patient, for example, at AIIMS, between the educational status of a patient who comes to him with a doctor. And so we're often looked at as if we come from another planet, right? And I don't think we do enough to disabuse them of that notion also. We obviously use paucity of time as our primary justification for behaving the way we do. But I think what the patient wants is, he's come with a problem. It's his or her problem which he or she wants resolved, not what you think is his or her problem, right? And we obviously convert that problem, for obvious reasons, into a scientific construct and address that accordingly, right? And we may have actually solved the scientific construct also. But very often that is not the entire part of what the patient wanted to be resolved. So I think we need to manage, and I'm not sure how successful we are, to manage not only the biological component of the problem which the patient is coming in, but the additional concerns which the patient may have. And I'll give you a very simple example. You know, when a patient is coming with a lump or a bump somewhere, actually, the first thing they want to be reassured is, ye cancer to nahi hai. You know, for you, it's obvious that it's a subcutaneous lump, it's got nothing, it's obviously not cancer. So you don't even bother talking about it because you know it's not cancer. But they don't know it's not cancer, right? So you're systematically saying, okay, it's a thyroid nodule, this is the size, this is the ultrasound characteristic, this is the FNAC characteristic, therefore this is the treatment line. You've done everything right scientifically, but you've not reassured them in their language about their question number one, कि ये कैंसर नहीं है और इसको छोड़ दूं तो क्या हो जाएगा. I think that's and I think on days when you have time, you do manage to address them. On the days when you have 200 patients, you possibly don't do a job.
I'll just add a little bit to that. Often we are also in position that we are patients. I know a lot of people sometimes say surprised that doctor bhi bimar ho jate hain, but it does happen. And also many of our, your relatives and even your kids do fall sick. So when you go to a doctor, you meet somebody who is obviously good and is going to make you better and is reliable and is going to do the best for your situation in your best interest. So that's it basically. It does not mean nothing more than that.
Right. And same question for Dr. PN Tandon, sir. What patients see in a doctor? Especially as a yeah.
Dr. PN Tandon also wants to comment on this.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just okay. You see, I'll tell you to take from where Nikhil stopped. It is very often we forget that what is important for the patient is what he wants, not what you want for him. And I'll give you a very good example of it. In FRCS examination, there used to be a patient with an ununited fracture of humerus. And this will be shown to the students and they will be asked, what do you think you should do? And the student will say, we should operate, we should plate it, we should do this, we should do that. And then the examiner will say, ask the patient what he wants. And the patient says, I don't want anything. I'm perfectly happy with what I have. The second thing which applies to surgeons. Do you know that when we started neurosurgery at All India Institute, the patient who used to come used to find out exactly how many operations we have done in that area, how many brain tumors have been operated by now, how many have survived, and only then have come to you. So initially, they try to find out what you have been able to do. Later on, it is your reputation. Your reputation may be so great, and you may be third rate, that they will keep on flocking to you. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So there is another question for Dr. PN Tandon from Dr. Jeevan Titiyal. That Dr. PN Tandon, sir, how did you manage the administrative responsibilities despite being such a busy surgeon?
Very easy. It's so easy, you can't believe it. Don't do anything. But I had another I had what you saw the photograph that Nikhil showed. I had Dr. Banerjee. So everything that I didn't want to do, I left it to him. And that was simple answer. Not that he was less busy, but somehow he could always find time if he knew that I wanted something done, which I'm not doing it myself. So you have to have your team and you respect your team. As Nikhil told you, the relationship we had with our whole team, not, of course, Dr. Banerjee set the example because he was next man to me. After that, Dr. Brahm Prakash, Dr. Ravi Bhatia, Dr. Mehta, each one of them followed a certain way. They treated the department as a department of their own. And therefore, everything that was needed to be done, it was not that it is his responsibility or that person's responsibility. It was anybody's responsibility who was available to do that. So wonderful.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, right. Dr. Subhash Gupta wants to ask if if you have any suggestions to remove mistrust between patients and doctors.
Yes, I can tell that. The best thing is to be able to spare time and talk to them. Nothing. Put your foot on the patient's bed and talk to the patient. You know, it is unbelievable. Patients who have died have sent us check year after year for whatever we did for the family. Because they thought that we did the very best, though we did not succeed. Right? So the most important, we used to, it was a standing order in the department. I know this patient is going to die. Nothing can be done. But before he dies, call me. I'll come here and talk to the patient's family before he is declared dead. And just that little thing saved us 25 years. No complaint against the department. No complaint.
Right. A wonderful piece of advice. Right. So if there are any more questions, we can ask them. Dr. Sandeep, do you want to ask anything?
No, thank you, Hardik, and thank you, Professor Tandon, Nikhil, and Radhika for this wonderful chat. I hope especially the undergraduates who are listening to it would have gained some way to get on with life in a more happy way. I think that is all wellness is all about. Thank you.
Right. So I'll also thank everyone, Dr. PN Tandon sir, Dr. Radhika, and Dr. Nikhil, and especially all the viewers who watched the talk. Thank you for being here and thank you for joining in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye. And thank you for having this session. We really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Hardik?
Yes, sir.
Sir wants to say something. I
I
want to thank you. That's number one. And number two, stop calling sir.
Right. So I think I'll kind of sum it up with thanking Professor PN Tandon for his rendition of medical grandfather tales, Professor Radhika and Nikhil Tandon for their enthusiasm and joy they were, Hardik, Arunanshu, and Dr. Sandeep Agarwala for adding magic to the masala that went on today. And Mohit, if you don't leave Professor Tandon's house now, I think Nikhil will start feeling a little rivalrous of you. He has spent lots of time there. I would like to thank all of you for joining in. Mohit, you should have the last word.
I really enjoyed his company. Like, he's such a wonderful personality. And I really enjoyed every minute of the talk and every minute I sat together with Professor PN Tandon. It was a privilege And I hope that this talk will give some messages to our undergraduates, to all of us who have joined here. And that's really wonderful. Thank you all.
Bye.
Okay.
Goodbye, sir. Thank you, sir.